global attention is riveted on a growing climate of unease, where trade disputes and defense priorities are colliding in dramatic fashion. A wave of new policies has sparked considerable friction, particularly between Washington, its allies in the European Union, and a newly resolute Canada redefining its national interests. Recent announcements of higher tariffs on metals and agricultural items have ignited anxiety among exporters, who fear losing critical revenue streams. European leaders have declared that any unilateral measures will be met with proportional responses, signaling an end to what they see as unchecked aggression. Major industries in Germany, including its iconic car makers, brace for stiff charges that may diminish their competitiveness and place countless jobs in jeopardy. France's prized wine sector likewise faces uncertainty, worrying that retaliatory moves could erode demand for its products abroad. Meanwhile, other EU nations, such as Italy and Spain, keep a vigilant eye on evolving trade constraints, hoping that negotiations might curb the worst outcomes. The European Commission, emphasizing collective strength, rallies member states to remain steadfast in unity, arguing that cooperation forms their most formidable defense. Beneath this confident exterior, some smaller countries quietly wonder if distinct compromises might protect sectors vital to their own economies. Simultaneously, Canada's political stage took an unexpected turn when Mark Carney was sworn in, replacing longtime Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Carney quickly set a bold tone, flatly rejecting any hints that Canada might ever integrate with its southern neighbor, no matter the economic rationale. Calling the prospect unthinkable, he underscored Canada's sovereign institutions, cultural heritage, and resources as elements too precious to cede. His remarks extended beyond mere declarations, with the Ministry of Defense announcing that Canada might reduce its reliance on American fighter aircraft. Defense Minister Bill Blair revealed the intent to reevaluate Lockheed Martin's F-35 contract, citing concerns about long-term maintenance and operational oversight. This echoes Portugal's choice to abandon its planned F-35 purchase, partially stemming from unease regarding U.S. restrictions and policy shifts. Observers note that if more NATO members follow Canada's path, the American defense sector could suffer a reduction in overseas demand. Within Europe, talk of expanding defense autonomy grows stronger, backed by initiatives aimed at fortifying domestic weapons production and lessening reliance on U.S. technology. Although producing advanced jets and sophisticated systems requires massive investments, many believe this pivot is vital given the changing geopolitical landscape. Policymakers across the EU point to the Rearm Europe movement, advocating for increased spending and modernization efforts to confront future challenges independently. Companies such as Germany's Rheinmetall have reported surges in sales, matching a broader trend of rising European defense allocations. Yet these ambitious plans are not without complications, as crucial materials and specialized labor remain in limited supply, creating production bottlenecks. Parallel to these defense shifts, the United States grapples with an ever-growing deficit, surpassing $1 trillion in just a few months. High interest rates have worsened the burden of servicing that debt, prompting fears of a spiraling situation where more borrowing feeds even larger obligations. Some suggest that tax cuts or reduced funding for agencies like the IRS worsen the problem, leading to lost revenue that deepens the fiscal imbalance. Others contend that a tough stance against perceived trade imbalances is critical, even if it briefly unsettles markets and raises consumer prices. Businesses dependent on Canadian or European markets voice their concerns, remembering how tariffs have, in the past, hindered competitiveness and access to foreign buyers. Similarly, American farmers track every tariff announcement, knowing their harvest exports can suffer drastically if foreign buyers pivot to alternative suppliers. Divisions in Washington persist, with some politicians endorsing robust measures and others cautioning that trade wars risk damaging the U.S. manufacturing base. Economic analysts warn that, should investor confidence wane, the global reserve currency status of the dollar could eventually be questioned. That status, which supports the U.S. borrowing model, rests on trust in treasury bonds, an asset that might lose favor if seen as tied to erratic policies. A shift in global capital flows could disrupt markets far beyond the U.S., with reverberations felt by banks, businesses, and consumers worldwide. Such risks ripple through political debates, fueling calls for balanced approaches that protect domestic interests without igniting an all-out trade conflict. Mark Carney's stark language about safeguarding resources and ways of life hits a chord in Canada, where many residents feel overshadowed by a much larger neighbor. The notion that key sectors from agriculture to water resources could be subject to foreign demands sparks a groundswell of public support for standing firm. At the same time, Canada's reevaluation of the F-35 purchase highlights how trade policy intersects with defense choices in unexpected ways. Should Ottawa opt for alternative jets, Swedish or other European firms may benefit, thereby strengthening cross-Atlantic defense ties beyond the U.S. Such developments coincide with the EU's quest for greater self-sufficiency, manifested in broad-based strategies to reduce reliance on external suppliers. Yet Europe itself faces hurdles, needing to harmonize the procurement processes of many diverse nations to realize truly unified defense programs. Despite these complexities, recent data shows European governments are accelerating expenditure, clearly aiming to bolster local industries while sustaining strategic readiness. In America, some question whether the rising deficit could force policymakers to refocus on domestic economic stability rather than wide-ranging trade disputes. Efforts by the Federal Reserve to manage inflation and encourage growth may slow if government debt continues to balloon, putting extra pressure on the economy. Meanwhile, the global community observes ongoing developments, sensitive to sudden shifts that might alter trading conditions or provoke new retaliations. In Germany, engineers watch the possibility of American levies on vehicles, which could dramatically raise the final sticker price of European cars in the U.S. French vineyards brace for the possibility that import duties could push American wine enthusiasts toward alternatives from Australia or South America. Italy's artisan cheesemakers also look anxiously to daily headlines, aware that any extra cost in the supply chain may dissuade cost-conscious foreign customers. These industries, vital to their home economies, exemplify how a trade war can strike at the heart of cultural exports that define a nation's identity. At the official level, the European Commission repeatedly stresses the goal of dialogue and mutual respect, but also vows to defend the Union's core interests. Talks behind closed doors may still avert an intensification of tariffs, but the public remains skeptical that compromise is within immediate reach. Once deeply interwoven partners, the U.S. and European nations now find themselves at odds, determined not to appear weak in front of domestic audiences. Canada's bold stance likewise underscores how medium-sized powers can leverage strategic decisions to establish more equitable terms on the international stage. While critics say such defiance might isolate them, supporters argue that self-reliance and resource protection are long overdue. The drama plays out against a backdrop of budgetary uncertainty in Washington, where some lawmakers advocate massive spending cuts and others defend social programs. The Treasury Department's monthly statements reveal historic levels of borrowing, dwarfing figures even from times of acute crisis. Optimists maintain that once the dust settles, the main players might find enough common ground for a balanced settlement, addressing real concerns. Skeptics caution that ideological divides along with election cycles might fan the flames of ongoing disagreements, making quick resolution unlikely. Should the clamor for national self-sufficiency continue to spread, alliances built over decades might be tested or radically reshaped. In that atmosphere, nations like Portugal and Canada serve as examples, showing how established relationships with the U.S. can shift when strategic priorities diverge. Meanwhile, European defense contractors sense an opening for deeper cooperation, forging advanced systems that may reduce the need for American equipment. Despite tangible barriers such as funding, technical expertise, and production capability, these firms see growing political will to boost manufacturing at home. The possibility of expanded defense cooperation among European nations and Canada could forge new alignments, leaving the U.S. in a more isolated position. On the economic front, industries worldwide remain wary of potential chain reactions, where tariffs prompt countermeasures, leading to higher prices and job cuts. Consumers ultimately foot the bill if trade wars erupt, paying more for goods once imported cheaply under open market conditions. Meanwhile, discussions continue about whether the United States can recalibrate its budget deficit without undermining its leadership role in global finance. If rising debt undermines trust in American fiscal prudence, other nations might advance alternatives, fragmenting the financial system. In Canada, Carney's ascension has reinvigorated the debate on how a country can thrive while protecting its sovereignty, resources, and economic well-being. This also resonates with certain European sentiments, as governments try to shield their citizens from unstable cross-border policy swings. The ultimate question remains: will everyone step back from the brink, or will a new era of confrontation replace decades of relatively stable cooperation? If negotiations fail, the fallout could reshape trade lanes, disrupt supply chains, and demand lasting adjustments in how nations approach globalization. At the heart of this lies a clash between nationalistic impulses and the recognition that global challenges often require collective action. Moments of high tension, however, can sometimes spark inventive solutions that balance security, commerce, and sovereignty in previously untested ways. The coming weeks will likely see intense diplomacy, where minor concessions might pave the way to partial understandings, though no outcome is certain. News of each advance, delay, or setback has real consequences for investors, producers, and ordinary families watching their costs and livelihoods. Observers stand by, anticipating future revelations on whether EU tariffs on iconic American brands will be enacted or suspended in favor of compromise. Similarly, Canada's defense procurement process could become a blueprint for other nations seeking greater bargaining power with U.S. defense giants. While the timeline for resolution remains unclear, what's certain is that these developments will reverberate beyond national borders, shaping the international order. Change is inevitable when powerful countries recalibrate alliances or question long-held assumptions about trade and defense cooperation. At this juncture, each side must judge how much it can concede without betraying its commitments to constituents back home. Still, many point to historic trade and security deals that overcame skepticism, suggesting that goodwill and strategic patience can bridge deep rifts. Yet, the unique dynamic created by ballooning deficits, assertive leaders, and shifting defense strategies cannot be taken lightly. Each passing day without resolution raises the stakes, leaving the global community on edge about what fresh revelations may surface. Only time will tell if the U.S. and its allies can rediscover a path toward equilibrium, or if a long period of uncertainty lies ahead.